Greetings, Ranger fans. Jake here for another edition of our deeper run-throughs for Power Rangers Dino Fury episodes 36 and 37, otherwise known as episodes 14 and 15 of Season 2. Welcome to everybody coming in through the chat right now. Again, these will be our live-streamed, unscripted analyses of these episodes of Dino Fury. The first half, we will be covering Rafkon Revealed, followed by the second half, we will be going over Morphin Master. These are our analysis reviews as we do our lead up to the premiere of Cosmic Fury at the end of the month. So every week, every Friday, we will be tackling another 2 episodes from Season 2 of Dino Fury as we're counting down to our deeper run-through of Cosmic Fury. Happy Friday, Sean. Thank you very much. With regards to new things with the fandom this week, obviously we had Power Rangers Day on Monday. That was the big 30th anniversary of Power Rangers. Not really much of anything new from Hasbro on that day, which was a little weird. I think all we got was a T-shirt promotion, which was a little disappointing for the actual 30th anniversary milestone. Hey there, Mr. Cool Guy. But we did, as of today, get a new Netflix trailer for Power Rangers Cosmic Fury. So if you do want to check that out, you have Netflix, feel free to search for Cosmic Fury. You will find the new trailer. There's a bunch of little spoilery things going on there that seem very exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And it's hard to believe that we've only got another 4 weeks left until it comes out. So that's going to be the big, 10 episode 30th season. That's definitely going to be very exciting. Oh, and there was also, thank you for reminding me, Scott, one clip that was released on Power Rangers Day, which I believe was featuring mostly a recap of what happened in Dino Fury Season 2, which is what we'll be discussing this evening. So, before we dive into our reviews, let us not forget that, as with all live streams, I always like to kick things off with 3 equally non-controversial phrases that we should all be able to agree are equally non-controversial. So, number 1, say with me, chat, Black Lives Matter. Number 2, say with me, chat, fascism is bad. And number 3, say with me, chat, superheroes are fun. We should all be able to agree to at the very least those 3 things, and we will be able to agree to 3 more at the end of the live stream. So, with all that being said, let us dive into a deeper run-through of episode 36 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Rafkon Revealed. This was obviously an episode that had been built up big time throughout the course of Season 1 and the first half of Season 2. And so this was definitely a major emotional payoff for all that build-up, specifically for the character of Zato. Ion as well, to a lesser degree, due to the fact that Ion was so focused on a different element of his character that had been built up slightly across the course of this series, not with nearly enough as much depth as with Zato's feelings of loss and concern and homesickness for getting back to Rafkon. He's really been the driving force throughout this series with regards to this particular plot line, and it was very satisfying to finally see that payoff for him. There were definitely a few moments that were very emotional. Getting ready to go out and see Rafkon again for the first time in 65 million years. Finally actually seeing it physically there, being on the surface, and of course that sweeping, New Zealand hillside. That was just a gorgeous aerial shot, combined with the flat sort of flashback trip down memory lane, where we got to see something of what Rafkon used to be. So all of that really, I think, hit very well emotionally. And I feel like Russell Curry as Zato really sold the emotion of those scenes. Zato, I think, has been a really solid Red Ranger throughout the course of Dino Fury. He's got very strong Andros vibes, and Andros is one of my personal favorite Red Rangers. Only instead of the sort of he doesn't have quite the same loner elements. Instead, he seems to really be more so. They ramp up the naivete that was also present in Andros, and really build up his self-sacrificing nature, as becomes very clear by the end of the episode. He's very willing to put himself on the line for his friends. He's willing to make the sacrifice play. And I think a lot of that ties into what happened to his previous team 65 million years ago, where they all sacrificed their lives. And that guilt just really carries with him throughout. And obviously becomes ramped up even further in the next episode, which we'll discuss during the latter half. Now, that being said, Ion, on the other side of things, was almost like an anchor to bring Zato back to Earth to a certain degree, because Zato was getting so caught up in the emotion of it, while Ion was getting very caught up in his mission. And that dichotomy created sort of a push and pull where each of them kind of had to keep bring the other back down to earth. Zato was getting caught up in the emotion and the longing for home, which Ion completely understood because it was his home as well. And then you had Ion very caught up in his mission, wanting to go it alone due to the prophecy of the Green Morphin Master, and Zato constantly trying to pull him back to being still one with the rest of the team. And that kind of push and pull during those moments I thought worked quite well. That being said, Ion's single-mindedness with regards to fighting Zedd did get a bit over-insistent at times. I recognize the point they were trying to make, and I know that when targeting a series for a child audience, sometimes you do need to sacrifice emotional subtleties for the purpose of effective communication to your audience. And I get that. It's just unfortunate that I feel like this has been something of a recurring issue with Ion throughout the course of the series, that whatever lesson he's going to have to learn in that story is they always kind of ramp him up, I feel, just a little too much. He's a little too strong-headed at times, a little too unwilling to accept the concerns of his fellow Rangers, and that's something that unfortunately often makes him a little less likable as a character, at least for me. Now, I do appreciate that they very clearly were subverting his expectations, that he was not nearly so well equipped to go up against Zedd as he thought. And part of that, I think, really tied into the fact that he was not present at Zedd's during their previous battle with Lord Zedd. He had only been present shortly after Zedd's resurrection, or whatever you want to call it, restoration. But he was not, but he did not encounter Zedd until the previous episode, Love Hate, and even then, Zedd did not engage in battle. Instead, they were very focused on dealing with Ollie's brainwashing. So this is Ion's first time fighting Zedd. And not only do all the other Rangers have a better idea of how powerful Zedd is in combat, as we saw during Old Foes back during season 1, but he's also gained additional power since then by reclaiming his staff when he recruited Scrozzle. So it really is a bit frustrating at times when he's ignoring the clear, superior knowledge and experience of his teammates. They know that all 5 of them together were not really equipped to combat Lord Zedd at a decreased level of power, and he has now stepped it up. So even though, Ion has that prophecy surrounding him, he really should be able to recognize that going it alone isn't the right course here. And I recognize that is the lesson of the episode. It's just one that, unfortunately, required the character to be obstinate to a slightly excessive degree, and that I felt oversold the moral to a degree. And this is a recurring issue throughout Power Rangers. Very often, somebody's negative qualities will be increased disproportionately for the purposes of a lesson, and that's a very fine line to walk. I don't feel like they really crossed the line here, but they really went right up to it, and it was a little bit of, it was one of the few negative aspects of the episode. Because obviously there was those very strong emotional beats, there were the very strong story beats in terms of finally getting a payoff on seeing Rafkon and additional mysteries surrounding it. Getting there, finding out that it is completely uninhabited, is a genuine additional twist. And I really do like how they handled the slow reveal of Rafkon across the course of this series, because they layer in every new step of the mystery with a new question. Every time you get an answer, you get a question. And it's not that our questions are completely going unanswered. We feel like we are working towards some level of answer to the question that we had at the beginning, which is, what is the status of the Rafkonians? And that's really the question that we asked from basically the beginning, from basically Lost Signal in episode 3, when Zato first tries to reach out to Rafkon and fails. But that first reach out leads to the first piece of the puzzle, and then we get the addition, and then we manage to get the cosmic key, which allows for them to locate the beacon, gives them the second piece of the puzzle, and that third piece of the puzzle from Zedd allows them to finally find it. But each time it's like, okay, why aren't they answering the question? Oh, why isn't the planet there? Where is it? Okay, we found the planet, but no one's there. And so there's always just that new twist that just keeps you hooked into the story and wanting to continue and wanting to move forward. Now, I am going to take a quick moment to address some notes I see in the chat here. I did neglect to mention that this week we did see some leaks of the new Lightning Collection Master Morpher, which is Tommy's Morpher from Dimensions in Danger. And that does have the recorded voice clips from Jason David Frank, quite possibly the last thing that he recorded for Power Rangers. So that is definitely a special item, especially if you're a Tommy fan. We don't know when that will be hitting the United States yet, to my understanding, but I know that it has appeared in other markets. And with regards to Ion not getting too much development in season 2, to a degree. Actually, I realized I forgot to kick things off at the beginning of this review with the actual little Netflix run through of Rafkon Revealed. When the Rangers journey to Rafkon, they discover Lord Zedd's plan to find the Sporix generator that can help him build his evil army. Now, we have gotten several Ion episodes before this. We had Losers Weepers. We had, which was him and Izzy. We had Serious Business. We had Tiny Trouble. In each of those cases, we seem to have that issue of him not taking the concerns of others seriously. And we've seen growth in fits and starts. I feel like we got some growth, more so from Ollie in Tiny Trouble, in terms of Ollie better understanding Ion. And I was hoping that that was leading to more progress for Ion as well. But that did seem to take quite a bit longer, which is unfortunate, but I recognize that to a certain degree, the twist, that turning point needed to come here. He needed to get to that lowest point. Just like Ollie, to a degree, had to get to something of a lowest point during New Leaf before he really realized how badly he had been treating people. So the characters do seem to have this steady arc of development that hits their peaks at different points in the series. And unfortunately, because Ion is the Sixth Ranger and the last character introduced, it seemed like the turning point for him came quite a bit later than a lot of the others, as far as their personal developments and personal growth. With him and Ollie really being the ones that had the biggest personality flaws, I felt, to overcome, whereas the others were dealing with other challenges with regards to their relationships with other people. We had, obviously Javi's relationship with his father, the development of Izzy and Fern growing into being a full-on relationship. Every Ranger has had that sort of very long arc, but Ion's felt like it just sort of kept getting touched upon. He learned a little bit, but didn't really change his behavior, learned a little bit, didn't really change his behavior, and then this is where he really faces consequences and has to cope with that. And then to address Malika's, hopefully I pronounced that right, question, will I be reacting next month's 10 episodes of Cosmic Fury? I'll be doing more of these deeper run-throughs, just like I'm doing for Dino Fury right now. So I'll be doing 2 episodes a week once it premieres, and that will run for 5 weeks. And then I'll be switching over back to my commentaries for Database Rangers Power Reviews as we lead into the finale. Now, one of the things that was, I think, somewhat controversial on this episode and really did open up some very good discussion within the fan base due to, if I recall correctly, comments made by Simon Bennett, the showrunner, was the inclusion of the Capture the Flag storyline going on over at Buzz Blast. Definitely a very silly subplot that took up more time within the episode than many other silly subplots have, but it's one that clearly had a purpose within the production process, and that was something that Simon Bennett clarified through his social media posts, which was that when you do ramp up on location shooting with your Rangers, where they're having these in-person battles, and they need to have the first unit really focused on them, then second unit, for the purposes of constant productivity, needs to be working on something in parallel. Usually second unit will be working on something like a fight scene, so that the stunt performers can be filming at the same time as the Ranger actors. However, in cases where there is a little bit more focus on the Ranger actors with first unit. Second unit will instead focus on the physical comedy subplot. And since this was a very original footage-driven episode, that meant that it was balanced out by a slightly more prominent comedic subplot. And it was clear that the actors had fun with it. It was definitely some points of levity in a otherwise very meaty episode, which I think upon first watch can definitely feel jarring. But upon second watch, definitely the having those lighter moments are definitely a bit of a relief from the emotional tension of everything going on in Rafkon. And it is also rather funny to see that continuation of Annie being just prominent in 3 episodes in a row. First with the search for Bigfoot, then with her little semi-romance with Stan, and now being just an absolute failure at Capture the Flag. Annie had a good run of episodes. Had a good run, I guess, of prominence there. Not necessarily ones that a string of episodes that painted her in the best light, but the actress definitely had a chance to have fun there. And her little awkward smile at the beginning was pretty effective foreshadowing of how quickly she would be failing at the game with Javi and Amelia not being present. The Trojan horse gag, definitely a little bit on the nose, a little bit much, but you know, cute enough, and it was rather funny to see Coach Bot back at the end for finishing things off. Not something I really saw coming, and it was a good little twist there. Very, very evocative of the paintball episodes of Community. If any of you have seen the sitcom Community, which tended to do a lot of pastiche episodes focused around different genres, and they one of their most prominent examples was the annual paintball fight for them, where they would have it would be like a war theme, or it would be a Western theme, or something like that, where they would go into one of those movie genres. And it definitely felt like this subplot was in the same vein as that, if not directly inspired by it. I can't necessarily speak exactly to what the points of inspiration were for the writers, and it was something that looked like a Nerf fight, but surprisingly, they weren't using actual Nerf guns, despite the fact that Hasbro owns Nerf, and that's just an amusing bit of irony. But it is something that I recognize is a contentious issue within the fandom. The use of physical comedy, whether or not that adds to or distracts from the episode. This one, really hard to tell, because it was such a plot-heavy episode. The comedic subplot felt more out of place. And it's also notable that second unit doesn't necessarily need to just be used for either fights or comedic sequences. That's something that I disagree with to a degree in terms of the focus of second unit, just because I feel like there is a third option that isn't always necessarily utilized, or at the very least, not as frequently acknowledged. And that is assigning second unit to the villains. Because a lot of times the villains will have their own subplots. Those villains have their own storylines going alongside. And I don't know exactly how things are aligned when it comes to filming those scenes. But in a villain base, you very rarely ever have the Ranger actors there. You basically, and you often don't necessarily have the monster or the henchman. You'll have the main villains. This kind of goes hand in hand with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 3, where it felt like Rita and Zedd had sort of formed their own little family sitcom within the context of the Moon Palace. And those sorts of sequences are things that could absolutely be explored on the side using second unit. At least that's my feeling. Um, it's not necessarily always going to be the right choice. I don't know exactly what they could have had the Void family doing in this particular episode, but they were absent from this episode. It was a choice where you had to decide, okay, which characters are you going to focus on for your second unit while we're doing all this stuff with first unit? Do we want to focus on our comedic supporting characters? Do we want to focus on our main villain characters? And I think that part of the reason for the decision here to focus on the comedic characters was to gain that levity, to release that emotional tension, and also because there wouldn't have been as clear a driving motivation for a villain subplot with Void King and Void Queen in an episode where the primary villain is Zedd. So that's what I believe likely the underlying rationale behind that decision, that choice. And also, I may be just completely overlooking this, and maybe one of the writers is just like, oh, let's do a Nerf battle. I've always wanted to do a Nerf battle. Let's do a Nerf battle. It can sometimes be as simple as that. It might just be not that deep, but obviously, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, I clearly overthink every single element of every episode. So, getting back to the Rafkon side of things, I do like the acknowledgement that the villains are primarily robotic, even though they really seem to play around with what a robot is and does at times. Like, okay, so Zedd was the only biological reading on the planet, which, all right, I'm guessing that you're ignoring plants as biological readings, and animals either aren't there or don't count. I don't know what the status is on those bio readings, how you determine what counts as a life form or not. But Scissorai complains about having had to use the bathroom, and I don't really know how that works for a robot. A little weird there, just slipping that in there. But it also wasn't the only little gag they had with them. We have, Scissorai later gets blown up just by a stray deflected blast from Zedd, and that is quite possibly one of the most amusingly anticlimactic, disposals of a villain I've seen. Where this guy who, had joined up with Zedd during his travels throughout the universe, who had gotten really not much of any particularly deep characterization until this point, just gets blown up by a random side blast. But it does, again, emphasize how strong Zedd is and how out of his depth Ion is. So it does still, again, serve a purpose. They really have ramped up Zedd's level of physical threat in Dino Fury compared to Mighty Morphin. And I really do owe a lot of that to the idea of it being Zedd at his most evil, meaning that it's a younger and more physically imposing version of Zedd. Since, Zedd is a villain who had been active for 10,000 years, it's entirely possible that he was stronger and more aggressive in his earlier days. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with Andrew Lang's performance, which I felt worked for this version of the character. And I'm hoping that the new voice for Cosmic Fury will be able to live up to that. But before I move on to the next episode, there is one last thing that I do feel the need to address as a science teacher, and that is the fascinating degree to which Rafkon has not really changed all that much during the time that Ion and Zeta have been away. And I know, all the buildings are gone, everything's overgrown, but for the sense of scale here, 65 million years. 65 million years. Do you realize, like, 65 million years ago on Earth, our continents were not in the same positions. Like, you would not be able to say, oh, hey, I recognize that mountain, that valley, because that mountain, that valley were not structured in that way 65 million years ago. The mountains are a result of tectonic plates smashing into each other, valleys pulling away, erosion, emphasizing all that. All those little elements. The biome element, the biome seemed to have changed. It was a desert when we saw it in the flashback before. Now it's overgrown grass and forests. But just the fact that that we can actually see the physical features being that consistent across 65 million years says something about the geology of this planet that I definitely want to dive more into in the next episode, because those tectonic plates should be moving around. Those are very static tectonic plates from the looks of things. And I wonder how that might tie into the fact that the Sporix machine draws from the magma core. And again, magma, ostensibly this magma would be, again, molten rock under the surface, so there should be something everything should be sliding around on. That is something that's just kind of wild. And yeah, that's not even getting into how life forms may have evolved over that time, but they didn't encounter any life forms there other than plants, so any discussions on that would have to wait for a different episode. So we do also, just like in the previous episodes, end Rafkon Revealed on another big twist reveal, shocking moments, getting you hooked in for that binge watching, which is we see Ion go up to Zedd, and Zedd just, boom, knocks him right out. As he should. As he would have done to any of the other Rangers now that he's at full power. We see Zeta come in, full-on shield mode, deflect the blast, Scissor Eye's gone, but he gets knocked out. And he seems to be fading fast. Zedd's raring up to go for another blast that we know they cannot take. And then all of a sudden, boom, off they go in little golden balls of light that seem to be a very familiar teleportation effect. They get Zato back to Dino Henge. He's still, his vital signs are crashing. And then the green Morphin Master appears, telling them everything's going to be okay. There are just so many good, solid plot developments. It really does come at you like pretty hard and fast. There's so many little elements to this episode that do make it work. I dig into some of the broader structural things, some of the character elements that I felt were less effective or a little jarring. But if you're here for the story is kicking. Like, we've got, get to Rafkon. We have a mystery of where the people are. We go up against Zedd. We find out that Zedd wants the Sporix machine, which we had set up way back in the previous season. We then have to have that encounter. Zedd manages to use his visor vision from back in season 2 to be able to find out where it goes. So those little nods to the past are excellent. We get to have a little bit more interplay of the new robotic generals that he managed to snag from Void King and Queen. The emotional hits of Rafkon, the reveal of having found the machine and Zedd getting a hold of it and then Zedd defeating the Rangers, and the Rangers being on their last legs, getting rescued by the Green Morphin Master, and that meaning all the new plot developments that come with that. So we are only 3 episodes into this half of the season, and it's just escalated so fast, and that's just very effective storytelling, really knocking down the dominoes that have been set up across the course of the series. So that is really where the strength of Rafkon Revealed comes in. The tones may be occasionally a little jarring, but when they hit, they hit. The character work on Ion may be a little exaggerated, but all the other characters are really hitting strong on their fronts, and we get to see him get knocked down at the end without having, with the understanding that's going to continue into the next episode, and then again ending on a hook, just like before. So let's get into that next episode. Let's dive into episode 37 of Power Rangers Dino Fury. This is the 15th episode of Season 2, Morphin Master. Now, Morphin Master, we have right here, our Netflix description. The Green Morphin Master heals Zato and gives him the Dino Master Saber to the Rangers, returning them to their mission to stop Lord Zedd. So, this episode is another one where there were very interesting things happening from a production standpoint. Much like in the previous episode, which was very original footage heavy, and they decided to balance that out with the Buzz Blast subplot, here they instead decided to focus more so on this functioning as a pseudo clip show. This season, Season 2, did have 2 clip shows, just like the previous season did. Previous season we had the Halloween clip show, and we had the Christmas clip show. This one we have the festival, and we have Morphin Master, both of which have the clips as a very minor element, which I found rather surprising. It's always surprising when you realize the clip show episode doesn't have the clips taking up a significant chunk of the episode. But just as in the festival, where that was used as a sort of homage to Ranger weapons of the past, this one is a stroll down continuity lane, addressing a bunch of little plot points of the Saban and Hasbro era, working to address these apparent plot holes that we've been dealing with. And some of them I felt work better than others. There's definitely certain things that I felt warranted explanation, and things that didn't necessarily. So we understand here that the Green Morphin Master has been violating the code of non-interference for the Morphin Masters. In that regard, very similar to, say, Uatu the Watcher in Marvel Comics. Kind of skirting the edges of the rules, but this time got a little too directly involved. And that makes sense with regards to what we saw of the Green Morphin Master before. She pops in, does what she has to do, gets out, refusing to answer any questions, and that's because she does not wish to basically get caught. She was responsible for the revival of Ion. She was responsible for the restoration of Dino Henge. And here we find out that she's also responsible for rescuing the Rangers on Rafkon. And we dig into all these other things that Zato suspects and then has confirmed she was responsible for in the past as well. We have the meteorite from Grid Connection, which honestly I think that is one where I do appreciate that there was a conscious, specific entity behind that meteorite, because it frankly made no sense and felt like a Deus Ex Machina at the time. So that definitely is a nice little patch on that. With Steel gaining his human form. I felt like that was a nice little nod. Didn't necessarily need that same level of explanation, but it does a good job of tying things together. The one that I felt um, was the least apropos was actually the legendary battle, even though that's been such a you know a controversial episode for so long, for almost 10 years now, because there's so many different things in Super Mega Force just kind of come out of nowhere and they vanish again. And so I found it very surprising that of all the things to explain for Legendary Battle, they chose to explain how the Rangers all teleported away at the end of the battle. Because that's something I didn't feel needed an explanation. Yeah, the balls of light seemed a little weird. I have my own underlying plot-related reasons for why that was significant in Database Rangers Power Reviews, which I would say is not in conflict with the explanation given here. But Rangers teleporting away from a battle after the battle is concluded, that just is kind of par for the course, and seem to only really be in there primarily to draw the connection with the teleportation effect used to retrieve the Rangers from Rafkon. What I think would have been the bigger thing to explain would be how the Rangers all ended up there to begin with, and that I feel is would have been more of a thing for the Morphin Master being behind Legendary Battle. Not having the Morphin Master be behind the exit from the Legendary Battle, because there was no urgency to them leaving the Legendary Battle. There was no emergency that required assistance for them to teleport away, and most of them already have teleportation ability, but bringing them all together, bringing them all into the Legendary Battle, I feel like that could have used that explanation. And while there was definitely a degree of implication there that she was responsible for that, the fact the focus was on the teleportation at the end kind of downplayed it and made me wonder, like, okay, so wait, was she responsible for that part or not? Because that seems like the part she should have been responsible for. So it's something where you're always walking a fine line when you get into things like introducing this retroactive continuity to tie up various plot holes. Obviously, I've engaged in plenty of that through Database Rangers Power Reviews, so I'm not necessarily going to criticize that. It's not a matter of concept, it's a matter of execution. Now, one of the things that's a little fuzzy is clearly defining the nature of the abilities of the Morphin Masters, which we have not fully gotten to at this stage. Perhaps we'll get more clarity on that during Cosmic Fury, where it does appear they might be playing another prominent role. But as far as we can tell, their primary abilities seem to align with transcending realities, so they can travel in and out of the Morphin grid, and that gives them enhanced teleportation skills. And we have the ability to generate and restore Ranger powers. That seems to be the core of their abilities, along with I zap you and you are now in a crystal. Just the strong mastery of energy manipulation seems to be the core of the Morphin Masters. So, as far as we can tell, they are very powerful. But we also established that they are not invincible. They can be injured. Their direct combat abilities are significant, but not beyond anything we've ever seen. We see during the final combat with Zedd that Zedd and the Green Morphin Master are almost on par in terms of energy levels, and that is kind of surprising you think of the Morphin Masters as being these like godlike entities within the Power Rangers universe, and they're really just on the level of the other very powerful beings that we've encountered before. They just happen to predate all of those beings and have a power set that is, and have an additional power set that is separate to abilities in combat. So that ability to generate Ranger powers. So that is how it makes sense. Okay, they create Ranger powers. It makes sense they could send down a Dino coin in a meteorite. Okay, they have the ability to restore energy. Then if somebody was to, evaporated into the grid, they can be reconstituted, and they have that ability. Teleportation, bringing Rangers in and out. And that seems to be what their abilities are. We don't know if there's more to it beyond that, but that seems to at least give us a baseline. They are not a catch-all for everything. They cannot completely undo everything. They are not totally invincible. They cannot fix every problem. So these are all things that prevent them from completely eliminating the sense of stakes. Because when you do introduce extremely powerful characters into a continuity, there is the risk that they basically act as sort of game breakers, story breakers, where there's no longer a sense of stakes because you know there's this massively powerful safety net that could always just solve whatever your problem is that you could bring in at any time. So them having a fairly defined power set combined with a clear lack of invincibility does prevent them from being pure Deus Ex Machina moving forward. And I hope that they are able to create other clear limitations on the Morphin Masters that will work well within the course of the story. And yeah, Scott is mentioning also Kendrix is another example of being resurrected through the Morphin Grid. We've seen also that this is not an ability that is specific only to Morphin Masters. Dr. K has done this. Dr. K has brought humans back that were absorbed into the Morphin Grid. She brought back Gem and Gemma at the end of Power Rangers RPM after they had been disintegrated by Venjix. So, while the Morphin Masters are absolutely established to be incredibly powerful here, they are not actually established as being considerably more powerful in terms of specific areas than other beings that had been previously established, including even humans. So that definitely gives them a lot of leeway in terms of things they could be connected to, while still having that sense of limitation. And that's the fine line where I felt like it wasn't completely firmly drawn. It's there. There is that little line where it's like, okay, they can't do anything and everything, but they could kind of do anything and everything that this particular story required. And that's one of the few things where it's like, okay, you're very close to sticking the landing. You haven't, you haven't failed, but you also haven't fully succeeded in establishing everything that necessarily is needed in that underlying storytelling moving forward. Because each time the Rangers are in trouble, we have Master Green popping in. She heals Zedd. Zeddo's no longer in trouble. She gives him a new weapon. Now they have a way to fight Zedd. They're fighting Zedd and they can't beat him. She comes in and helps finish the job. So that's one of those things where it kind of undermines Izzy's statements at the end of the episode, where she's talking about, hey, we defeated we defeated Lord Zedd. We helped the Morphin Masters. When really the Morphin Master was the one that defeated Lord Zedd. And you guys all kind of nearly lost, and that's something that I felt could have been a little bit more acknowledged. That sense of, while I don't want to take away from their victory over Zedd, because it was a collective victory, they did assist in that, and it is an important milestone within the story. I would have almost appreciated an added element here that's often seen in cosmic horror stories, where you get this glimpse of a larger world beyond you, and it makes you feel just a little bit smaller and a little bit more helpless. And reckoning with that, I think, would have been a deeper emotional story. I know that the focus here was continuing Ion's character development from the previous episode with regards to him understanding that being the key to defeating Lord Zedd didn't mean that he had to do it alone. It meant that every person is needed for this, and we cannot fail, or we cannot succeed without everyone's contributions. Which I do think is a different lesson that is very powerful. So just sort of that balance there between, we've been exposed to a larger world that makes us feel smaller, but we are also part of that larger world, and together we can contribute to it. And I think that juxtaposition was definitely there, but could have been a little stronger. So there were a lot of things where I felt like they did a good job. There was some really good story ideas. There were some very interesting concepts that were introduced, but I felt like they weren't necessarily all utilized to the best degree they could have been. And that's, really a lot. It comes down to benefit of hindsight. Obviously, I am looking at the finished product and seeing how that could be improved upon. I am not looking at, well, there was this draft, and then we improved upon that, and then there was that draft, and then we improved upon that, and then there was that draft, and it's Monday morning quarterbacking kind of thing for my side of things, where I'm just saying like, oh, well, you could have done this little bit more. Okay, well, we also did all these other things, and they did do a lot here. They did a lot in terms of building out their universe, building out the lore, and it's remarkable to me that the Lord Zedd subplot of this show was not part of the original 22 episode pitched series. As many of you know, Dino Fury was initially pitched as a single 22 episode season before getting an additional order that expanded to 2 seasons, and they stretched those 22 episodes out to extend across the course of the full series, and then inserted additional short arcs throughout. There is a fantastic image that Simon Bennett posted a while ago where you got to see that episode layout, and you got to see, okay, so these were the original 22, and then this got inserted there, this got inserted there, this got inserted there. And there are a few that are, very obvious that they were inserted later. Most specifically, we had the insertion of the season finale, season premiere, separation in between, which makes perfect sense. But also the Lord Zedd subplot, Old Foes. They were building it out, and Hasbro suggested, hey, what about tossing in another villain? Can we bring back something like Lord Zedd? And they're like, oh yeah, no, that could be really interesting. And he also seemed to have liked that enough that he's, has raised to another level of prominence, as we'll get into later with Cosmic Fury. Not to get into any spoilers in advance there. I know the trailers are out there, so I think people know at least a certain degree at this point. But the fact that Zedd was not part of the original story really makes me wonder how Rafkon was addressed in that original pitch. Because while it's clear which episodes were part of the original pitch and which ones got inserted later, what isn't clear is which plot elements may have gotten taken from the original pitch and pulled out and popped into other episodes. Like, I feel like the search for Rafkon was something that they were engaging in throughout. But I don't know if they were originally going to go there. Because that story ended up in the Lord Zedd plot. And I definitely don't know if they were originally planning the destruction of Rafkon, which was obviously, the Rangers' big failure of the episode. Their failure to stop Zedd from stealing the Spork's creation machine and destroying Rafkon as a result. Which, it's an emotionally impacting moment. You can feel the devastation for both Ion and especially Zato. But one, it's something where they kind of get past it pretty quickly in the focus on Zedd and saving Earth. And two, you have the underlying questions of, okay, but why? I understand why, from a story perspective, we want to do this. It's an emotionally impactful beat. But why in universe? Was this necessary? There's the Doylist perspective versus Watsonian perspective. Doylist referring to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle writing Sherlock Holmes, and Watsonian referring to James Watson, John Watson inside the stories themselves. So, okay, why did Zedd have to take the Spork's machine away from Rafkon, considering that its energy source is the planet itself? That feels like a little bit of an odd choice, since, he only has as much magma energy as was already in the device, and he wouldn't be able to make more than a single batch of Sporks with that energy. So that felt like short-term thinking on Zedd's part, especially since doing so also destroyed the planet where he would have been able to get more magma core from. Not that magma is tremendously hard to find, but I feel like if you have a magma-powered device, maybe teleport to a volcano, maybe go to the planet Calderon. That planet was from Power Rangers in Space. Tons of volcanoes all over the place. But again, being nitpicky here. Although I will say, beyond just, why would you plug any machine into your planet's core in such a way that it would destroy your planet if it were removed? That seems like just a bad idea in general. I wonder actually if this ties into my tectonic plates issue from earlier, which is that the entire planet has very rigid tectonic plates, which is why we haven't seen these topographical changes in the landscape over the course of 65 million years. And if it is just that one solid sheet around the entire planet, surrounded by a magma core, maybe that's why it's so susceptible to being blown apart, because it doesn't have the same flexibility that other planets would have. And so it's, to a certain degree, overly brittle, and you basically have it in such a way where if the pressure gets out of whack underneath that surface, there's no way to vent that pressure, and everything bursts apart. So that is my theory with regards to how the lack of topographical changes over the course of 65 million years actually foreshadows the underlying mechanics of Rafkon's destruction. Again, I know I'm overthinking this. I really sincerely doubt that this was an intentional thing of the writers. Really, it just comes down to, okay, if the planet looks absolutely nothing like how they remembered it, then we're not going to be able to have those emotional beats. we need to blow up the planet because we want to have that emotional beat. It's not getting into the scientific underpinnings of how the tectonic plates of this planet operate. That is not the focus of this story. We do not need to dive into that. We can just trust that it works and leave it to some random fan who has far too much time on his hands to try and get into the scientific explanation of that. So that's where I get to on that front. And I know I haven't been responding to the chat in a bit. I see Scott wanting to know why there's not a society of energy beings there after 65 million years, which, if any of you have seen Babylon 5, you get the idea that that's what, living beings eventually evolve into, even though I have no idea if that's how evolution can or should work. But yeah, I think I had acknowledged before that that I think that Kendricks's resurrection was in line with the resurrection of Gem and Gemma, and also of Steel. And again, we get a nice little nod to continuity and all these little bits, like Izzy saying how much she loves Kung Fugitive, and realizing that it's the same Steel Silva, although I'm actually rather surprised she didn't know that already. I recognize she just, again, for the purposes of the joke, she didn't know that at the time. And that's where a lot of the little cracks in the episode kind of exist, in that I understand the Doylist explanation for this, but the Watsonian explanation could be stronger. Even though we are delivering, and I say this almost ironically because we are addressing Watsonian explanations for previous poorly explained plot points. So it's a game of whack-a-mole. While you're focused on trying to deal with one issue, other little questions pop up at the same time. Why is this planet so susceptible to explosion? Why doesn't Izzy know about this thing? Why, did they interfere in this regard but not that regard? Little things pop up throughout. And you just kind of have to roll with it and recognize that certain things are and are not within the purview of the story. I will say that the introduction of the Master's sword, the Master Saber, Dino Master Saber, that was it. Very much in line with classic Power Rangers of, oh, the bad guy beat you once, come back to base, I got a new toy for you, that should make it better. And you always have the question of, okay, well, why didn't we have this before then? Although this one actually, unlike most weapons that kind of get dropped in on you out of nowhere, there is actually a fairly strong emotional reason for it not to have been introduced before, which is the fact that it is so dangerous ostensibly to use effectively. The fact that if you use its final attack, you are draining power from your Zords and sacrificing yourself. And that is, not something that you want to give to a mortal lightly. I do feel like the explanation of the mechanics of the sword could have been slightly better conveyed. That you need to be using the ultimate attack in order for it to cost you your life, and that is specifically the ultimate attack that draws from the Zords. Because she did kind of say that in passing as she was describing the ultimate attack. But then she said if it's used to strike down your foes, then you'll be sacrificed as well. And that was something where, it destroys anyone who uses it to destroy their enemy. And that was something where just the use of of a pronoun instead of a proper noun uh, created a bit of confusion for me on first watch, because I was thinking, okay, so if you use the swords to destroy your enemy, then it will destroy you. Oh no, you meant if you use the ultimate attack to destroy your enemy, then it will destroy you. That was a little bit unclear in the dialogue. Um, so it got to the point where I'm just like, as I was watching, it's like, okay, and then he's fighting monsters. Oh, he just used the finisher on this monster. Is that? Oh, that doesn't count. Using the finisher um, against Boom Blaster doesn't destroy. Okay, I don't know why that one didn't destroy you. But apparently this other, okay, it's because, and I'm like, is it because Boom Blaster doesn't count as your enemy, or is it because there was a different attack? Because we don't know what the final attack for this thing looks like at this stage. So when I see a finisher animation, I'm thinking, oh, this is the final attack. Not even if it's not actually the ultimate attack. So that's just a little bit of mechanics where, yeah, just a bit of clarification in the dialogue actually could have gone quite a long way. And we do get this nice wrap up at the end. This is actually the first out of these first 4 episodes not to end on a major cliffhanger and a major hook. It gives you that little bit of breather at the end, which is appreciated, and I do actually think has value. If you position your episodes appropriately, then you can um, then you can build up that investment. You have that big catharsis, and if you do it at the right timing, there's enough buy-in and enough engagement that even if the next episode isn't going to be another major part of the story, or you don't have an expectation for it to be, you still want to be like, okay, well, I need another breather, and I'm enjoying these characters, so I'm going to take that breather with whatever the next episode is. I felt like Power Rangers in Space did that very effectively. I've praised it often for having those 5-episode arcs followed by a breather episode, followed by a 5-episode arc, followed by a breather episode. I felt like they did that extremely well, and I feel like, to a certain degree, Dino Fury is doing similar work here. We had a solid 4-episode arc that steadily built up to a major climax and major story developments, in little minor ways that built and built and built and built. And then and then we may have a little breather. And even within the context of the 4-episode stretch, it in and of itself was a breather from a different storyline, the storyline of the Void family that had been so prominent for the first half of the season. And then they are, really in the background during this arc. They don't appear for half the arc, and when they do, it's really mostly in a supportive role to Zedd. And that's just kind of fascinating. There is, one last little missing link that I am hoping gets resolved in Cosmic Fury. And this is one thing that I keep wanting to see with regards to anything in Rafkon, but haven't gotten that payoff yet. And that is, what was the enemy that required the creation of the Sporix in order to defeat? Who was that enemy? Is that enemy still a threat? That is something I really hope gets addressed in Cosmic Fury. Because it was something that I was thinking may be coming up here, but still has not. And I also wonder if that ties into the the hunting down and destruction of all those old Morphin Masters. To a certain extent, that attempt to wipe out the Morphin Masters Who was involved in that? Are those villains still a threat? We know that sometimes villains can last for 65 million years. The Sporks obviously have that longevity in their Sporks form, in their little Sporks eggy forms. We know that Sledge and his crew had no problem surviving for 65 million years. We know that Flurious and Moltor, believe, were imprisoned for even longer than that. I think they were 150 million years, if I recall correctly. So there's that's sort of that dangling threat in the background that I would love to see get addressed and resolved in Cosmic Fury, because I feel like there's another good little meaty story element there, and having those little things just kind of hanging in the background are really nice and enticing for wanting to watch more. Even if things turn out to be plot holes for now, this episode really helped establish that they may not be plot holes forever, and you never know when something might get picked back up and addressed later in a fun, exciting way that may push a different story forward. So while each of these episodes had a bit of a push and pull in terms of strengths and weaknesses, they really did do a great job of driving the story forward and building out the universe in some really meaningful ways for Power Rangers Dino Fury. So I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts on either of these episodes. If you would like to chime in on anything remaining, feel free to pipe up in the chat. I think I ran a little longer on these two episodes than I did last week. And that's largely just in part to there just being so much to discuss from both a story perspective, a character perspective, and a production perspective. There was a lot going on in these episodes, and I enjoyed being able to share those with you. So I hope that you have enjoyed yet another live stream this week. I hope that you will return next week as we continue our run through of that final half of the second season of Dino Fury to sort of work ourselves up and get ourselves prepared for the new season, Cosmic Fury, coming soon, with our exploration of Dino Fury's finale coming on the same day as the premiere of Cosmic Fury, which I think is a bit of serendipitous scheduling. And before we leave, let us not forget our 3 remaining equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Robots are cool. And sometimes they just need a hug. Speaking of amusing little gags that I had forgotten to mention earlier. Null-Eye asking Boom Blaster for a hug for like the 10th time was very cute. Alright, so thank you all again. Tune back in next week. I will say that I have been filming up a storm in this studio. Characters are rapping, major characters have been rapping, and pretty soon I might be done donning this helmet. So, stay tuned. The finale is coming. And until next time, farewell, Ranger fans. Let the power protect you.